Breaking news. Welcome to today's headlines. 1.74 million children in Northeast at risk of malnutrition. 1.74 million children in Northeast at risk of malnutrition. UN reviews. To my dear listeners, from wherever you're listening from, please stay tuned as I read today's news. The United Nations has decried that worsening food insecurity may push 1.74 million children under the age of 5 in northeast Nigeria into malnutrition. A statement on Tuesday by the United Nations Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator for Nigeria, Mr. Matthias Skillmay, titled "Surviving the Food Crisis in Northeast Nigeria," said today in Northeast Nigeria, millions of people were facing the painful consequences of a deteriorating food security and nutrition crisis. Skillmay, who explained that food insecurity means not knowing when or where your next meal will come from. It means, in essence, not being able to meet the basic needs for yourself or your family. As a result, countless families are forced to make alarming sacrifices to survive. Many, particularly children, are at risk of not making it through the lean season. He noted that according to the latest food security assessment, 4.1 million people in Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe State, 3 of the states in northeastern Nigeria, were at risk of severe food insecurity in this lean season, lamenting that people's resilience and coping mechanisms have been devastated by more than a decade of conflict. He said, as food insecurity worsens, so does the risk of malnutrition. In 2022, 1.74 million children under 5 are expected to suffer from acute malnutrition across the Northeast. Mothers who have lost their children to malnutrition can testify to the danger it poses and the sorrow and despair it brings. While visiting a nutrition stabilization center in the Northeast, I saw the haunting sight of a child on the brink of death, and it is a memory that continues to leave me troubled. He noted that the food security situation is impacted by many factors, such as insecurity due to ongoing conflict, rising food prices, and climate change, which is taking place in a region where people are already facing extreme vulnerabilities. Northeast Nigeria has struggled through 12 years of conflict and instability due to the violence of non-state armed groups like Boko Haram. He revealed that this year, 8.4 million people need humanitarian assistance, of which about 80% are women and children, adding that violence had displaced more than 2.2 million people from their homes, livelihoods, health services, education, and other essential areas have been devastated, depriving millions of people of critical support and the capacity to provide for themselves and their families, he said. Kïllïñgs lamented that people displaced by violence have few options. Many fled to garrison towns for safety. We are going beyond the town's protective ditches to practice agriculture or collect firewood put their lives at risk. Many vulnerable people have little choice but to resort to negative coping mechanisms to obtain food, such as survival sex, child marriages, begging, child labor, or recruitment into armed groups. He gave a story of Awa, a mother in Ran, Borno State, with no access to food and must beg on the streets to feed herself and her two children. Declaring that this was not nearly enough, and hunger had turned her body into something she no longer recognizes. Ahua was quoted to have said, "This is not my body." He said as part of the USD $1.1 billion required for the 2022 humanitarian response plan for Nigeria. A $351 million multi-sector response has been developed to save lives and protect the most vulnerable, noting that funds are immediately needed and every contribution can make a difference. The United Nations has decried that worsening food insecurity may push 1.74 million children under the age of 5 in the northeast Nigeria into malnutrition. A statement on Tuesday by the United Nations resident and humanitarian coordinator for Nigeria, Mr. Matthias Kïllïñgs, titled "Surviving the Food Crisis in Northeast Nigeria," said today in Northeast Nigeria, millions of people were facing the painful consequences of deteriorating food security and nutrition crises. To my dear listeners, now we've come to the end of our today's news. Please do drop by the comment section and let's know what your view is all about. Thank you for